This is a breakdown video of John Ashcroft, U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft, on September 16th, 2001. Not a very long video. It's about 9 minutes long, approximately. See what he has to say.
During this past week, we've been dealing with the impact of an assault on the United States and civilized people of the world that has come from a pervasive and substantial terrorist network. It's a matter of the compound nature of the tragedy to understand that nations from Argentina to Zimbabwe, from A to Z, have lost hundreds of citizens in this tragedy. It illustrates for us that terrorism is the enemy of human civilization.
When he talks about terrorism being the enemy of human civilization, this is, par for the course. But what he tends to ignore, conveniently in this case, is that the media is blaring that this is Islamic fundamentalism, and this is the problem. And by that subliminally, that subliminal message, Islamic fundamentalism. Now, in general, Americans know very little before 9/11 regarding, say, Islamic fundamentalism. And if you weren't a Muslim, you knew very little what it was. But now, in the day that 9/11, I lived with it. I lived on the border of the range, and there was stories coming out that even for the heat, that not even a one that burned them at a gas station, like some dumb idiot. America, right? American, we're people at 30 with luck. It's killed everything. We could have went to war with East Iran and we would have supported. So, what is terrorism? Terrorism is when an organization, right, enacts on a violent engagement to achieve a political goal. And the United States, in this respect, committed an act of terrorism immediately after 9/11. Because what they do, they basically wanted to go to war with Iraq. Because even on the day of 9/11, in the evening hours, still smoldering in New York City, there were a group of neocons in the Bush White House, most notably Richard Pearl, Douglas Clay, Paul Wolfowitz, Scooter Libby, and others that were pushing for this to be a blame for Iraq. They told the director of the FBI, Robert Mueller, to investigate whether Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. He couldn't. Then they went to the CIA. And then the CIA went to, foreign intelligence, found out that there was an individual that was arrested in, I think he was arrested in Pakistan, in Egypt. And then that person was Sheikh Ibn al-Libni, who was tortured because the CIA didn't implement the torture program just yet. They were talking about it at this point, but they couldn't torture. So they sent to Egypt, he was tortured, and he basically told his Egyptian captains anything they wanted to hear. And then we went to war with Iraq based on it, because we gave that intelligence, not vetted at all, to Secretary of State Ron Powell, went to the council, and they approved the war. So, in this respect, terrorism is not just about Islamic fundamentalist groups. After 9/11, the United States became the biggest terrorist. Well, even before that, but still, you understand that, we're going to fight against terrorism and win. but you acted just like this. In fact, you were worse. You were worse than terrorists. And the whole, you know, the lesson that we should have learned was not to be like those who attacked them. Instead, the CIA, Cofer Black, the head of the counterterrorism center, basically said the gloves come off. And we're going to be walking across their eyeballs. Live, we'll be walking across their eyeballs. The CIA had a meeting with Bush regarding a illness for people who they wanted assassinated that was linked to this. And Bush approved. And Cofer Black gave that speech. He had to give a lecture. So he told Bush at the end, you give us this authority where the gloves come off, you'll see Taliban and Al Qaeda fighters with flies walking on their eyeballs. And what happened? Well, the United States engaged in numerous wars. Afghanistan, of course, the longest war in U.S. history, Iraq, and then when Bush was out of office, Libya and Syria and Yemen under Obama. So we've had this transitional period of administration that were basically all precepts of what happened on September 11th. In fact, every single administration since then was basically going on the precepts of their foreign policy goals from neoconservative think tanks like the Project New American Century and those under the Paul Nietzsche school regarding free dominance over the world. Before that, you had Zygmunt Brzezinski's foreign policy guidelines, which were called, he made a book about it, the Grand Chess, taking over Eurasia, making sure that the Soviet Union was not the global superpower, but the United States. In order to do that, they needed to be defeated. Once they were defeated, we basically needed an event like a new Pearl Harbor, as stated in the Project New American Century, to accelerate this new geopolitical outline regarding U.S. imperialism. And they had to destabilize the Middle East in order to do this, because Israel and Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain demanded it. So who became the terrorists in the end?
Our effort
It'll pause once I pause them.
is to develop all the information we can about terrorism, the terrorists and the terrorist networks that have inflicted this injury on the United States and this assault upon the people of the world, and to do everything we can to disrupt them and to put an end to their capacity. They have declared war on the United States with an act of war, and the President has very carefully noted that we consider it a responsibility to do everything within our power to those interests that threaten the United States and its interests to end their capacity to do so.
We could have had planned to basically capture and rendition bin Laden in the mid-1990s. The CIA, the Department of Defense, the Defense Intelligence Agency were arguing, along with the Director of National Intelligence, they were arguing over who could pull this off. During the Clinton administration, saying ridiculous proposal by Clinton to the Joint Chiefs and said, why can't you guys go down there in Afghanistan, surrounded, knowing that the one was surrounded by the Taliban, their, house guard, and just black off the helicopter in rendition. Now, the Joint Chiefs at the time, he basically turned around afterwards and talked to his associates and said, this guy watching too many movies. The CIA was then asked, hey, can you basically drone strike? Because they were just implementing the drone strike program under Clinton. And by the way, the capture and rendition program didn't happen under Bush, it happened under Clinton. He's the one who wrote the executive order on it. In, I think, 97, 90, don't put the number. It's right on. Well, anyway, they said, and they were reformed under their new director, the DCI, George Tenet, said, hey, I'm trying to realign the CIA to make it more people for the public. So they didn't want to do it. Nobody wanted to assassinate bin Laden. Michael Shorter, the head of the bin Laden History Station, brought up some ideas and nobody wanted to take them up on it. So there was a lot of conflict about whether bin Laden should be assassinated, rendition. Nobody wanted to pull the trigger. So until it was too late. You would think that after the embassy bombing, that we would have a proper response. But if you watch some committee edited as I made and shared on my playlist, you'll find like videos of people within the Department of Defense that basically said that it should have been an act of war and we should have engaged. And that's what bin Laden wanted. By attacking the embassy, he wanted to engage the United States into like a similar war where the Soviet Union would be dragged out for a number of years, hurt their economy for its country thought. But he gave Bill Clinton a lot of credit bin Laden. Said that he wasn't in a reactionary. So the next step was bring the war to down and attack the United States. Now here's the thing. Bin Laden basically did, but the intelligence services were monitoring bin Laden well before the embassy attack. And this is the reason why I said, and I keep repeating this ad nauseam, was that if you want to get to the crux of 9/11 and every other terrorist event from the mid-90s onwards, you have to go and get those cables declassified regarding the NSA monitoring of the Yemen hub, which was the Al-Qaeda communications hub, where all the calls were coming from Al-Qaeda worldwide. Because if they were talking about 9/11 and NSA didn't share this, either it was through malfeasance or another nefarious purpose. I'm not even bringing up the foreign intelligence services of Saudi Arabia and Israel, because God knows what they had, if they had anything at all. But at least we know that the NSA and the CIA were monitoring bin Laden and that house in Yemen since 1996. And I think I'm the only person left that only brings us up constantly. You want the answers? It's right there. Get the NSA to declassify those cables. What was talked about on that phone? Just imagine, you're Al-Qaeda, right? You're an Al-Qaeda member, or even the hierarchy. Bin Laden, Mohammed Atta, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Abu Zubaydah, I don't know, Fahad Saif al-Mahdi. All these people hired, all the top leadership, right? Suleiman al-Ghani, Ramzi bin al-Smith, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and so on. Right? So, what do you think? Do you think they're talking about? I always do the joke. What do you think they're talking about? The Yankees and girls with fat asses, right? Even serious people. They're talking about either operations or plans for this and that. You're not going to waste time on the phone. An Al-Qaeda member in Egypt or in Syria, where they're under a socialist leadership, are having their phones monitored. What the fuck? They don't have boards based on, controlling of the country. These are totalitarian, authoritarian leaders. So they call this house in Yemen using code, primitive code, and they send a message through this house to, say, bin Laden in Afghanistan, or to Ridwan Isamudin, Hambali in Indonesia, wherever. But this is the most surveilled house in the world. And nobody talks about this. If you wanted to break the crux of 9/11, it's right there.
Obviously, among the organizations that have that capacity and have previously been involved in assaults against the United States and its interests is the network of Osama bin Laden and his network. It is important to note that in recent months and years, a variety of terrorist organizations have cooperated in networking together, and that terrorism is an enemy to civilized people. We will be doing everything we can. We have launched the largest single investigation in the history of the United States. We have 4,000 active FBI agents pursuing a wide variety of tips and understandings and questions.
The FBI investigation, of course, is called Pentagon. Pentagon, Twin Towers bombing, right? Planes bombing into it. The you conspiracy theory, the bombing of the World Trade Center. But that's what the operation, Pentagon.
We'll get to the bottom of this circumstance, but we'll also develop an understanding of how we can prevent further episodes, assaults on America and our people.
Well, that's very easy. One is to change your foreign policy, plain and simple. And when it's directed and shaped and fashioned by foreign governments such as Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Qatar and Israel, right? You're going to have a very prejudicial or very twisted, morally twisted foreign policy because these governments are perverse. And fast forward to the year 2025, am I fucking wrong? The leadership of Saudi Arabia under Mohammed bin Salman, who took over the country by force and killed an American journalist in Jamal Khashoggi, and the ideology present, which is Wahhabism, which created groups like Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Then you have Israel led by a bunch of secular and religious fucking psychopaths. Benjamin Netanyahu, Bezalel Smotrich, Ben Gvir, Osip Stroop, and others just waiting in the wings to basically slaughter more Palestinians and expand the borders for greater Israel. But these are the governments that basically are the terrorists themselves currently.
It's clear to me that we need to upgrade and strengthen a number of laws in the United States. The Congress has very appropriately expressed its thorough willingness to provide for the president the resources that are appropriate in terms of finances to conduct this effort, and I believe they will cooperate to provide the enhanced law enforcement resources by way of authority.
And currently at this time, during this time, right, of the Bush administration, in the days after 9/11, there was already, the wheels were already turning regarding the restrictions of civil liberties afforded to the American people, also to foreign enemy combatants. And that power was being taken away by the Attorney General, John Ashcroft here, as well as the director of the Department of Justice, Rob Mueller, and as well as the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, that weren't invited by Dick Cheney, who was really the president of the United States, and led by his White House counsel, people like John Yoo and Alberto Gonzalez, and Cheney's own personal lawyer, David Addington, in the reformation of civil liberties for Americans and for greater war powers to the president of the United States. Because at this point, they said that we are in an eternal state of war with terrorism. Now, unlike other wars in the past, this is the first time in American history where we were at war with an ideology. Because, if we're at war with a certain country and the country is defeated, the war is over. But you can always say that there's terrorism prevalent. It's an ingenious idea by, Dick Cheney and the White House legal counsel to basically always have a war on terrorism. And it doesn't have to be Islamic fundamentalists, because now it's up to the president to dictate what is a terrorist. Before, that law was up to, the investigation by the Department of Justice and local law enforcement, right? Who is a terrorist? Well, we have to prove that this person or organization is engaging in terrorism. Is he getting funding from, say, Pakistan, Afghanistan? Where is that money going? Is it going to charities, or is it going to private donations? Well, now the president makes that decision. The president can basically say, without evidence, I think this country is engaging in terrorism. And this was such a dangerous proposal that Bush went on vacation in November of 2001. A lot of people don't remember this. Cheney basically had a secret meeting with his White House legal counsel. And when Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell and John Ashcroft found out what was going on, it was far too late. That their powers were taken away from them regarding federal mandates afforded to every single person in the United States, and it extended beyond that too. That means the United States can intercept phone calls. And so when the NSA was invited to the White House, Director Michael Hayden at the time really didn't know Bush that much, and Bush didn't know much about Hayden and the secret agency of the National Security Agency. And what they did was later on, under the Obama administration, Obama basically said, hey, we'll give the NSA anything they want regarding cell phone data, private data from every single customer of every single cell provider in the United States. It was AT&T that first did it. That the NSA just took all the text messages and phone calls and stored them, hoarded the information into a building called the Utah Data Center, which is located in Pine Bluff, Utah. And so the erosion of civil liberties didn't come from Islamic fundamentalists. It came from the United States government. And people applauded the fact that Obama was president because he was black. Oh, here's a progressive. Meanwhile, he was much worse than Bush in a lot of regards. With the exception of the amount of people he killed. Bush killed a lot more people under his administration than Obama did. Well, Obama, in terms of civil liberties, was the biggest abuser of them all.
Let me indicate a few of the matters that I believe will be in a package that we will carry to the Hill, and ask members of the Congress to assist us in this effort by enacting authorizing legislation. I might add that I expect to be involved with members of the Congress on the Hill this afternoon in discussing these issues. In terms of upgrading and strengthening our capacity, let me say that we need to make sure that we have assigned a high priority to the fight against terrorism. There are areas of our laws and procedures which give us better tools against organized crime, against illegal gambling, for example, than we have against terrorists. We need to make sure that we provide the maximum capacity against terrorists in the United States. We need, for instance, to make it, to elevate the penalties for those who would harbor or assist terrorists to at least the same level as the penalties for those who would harbor or assist those who have been involved in espionage.
What's funny is that the Department of Justice, the full resources of the FBI were concentrated on finding desperately any links for terrorism organizations inside the country. And, there was a lot of cases of false indictments of Arab Americans inside the United States. So much so that the New York Times and the New York Daily News, as well as the Los Angeles Times and Miami-Dade Times, all reported in the years prior to 9/11, 10 years afterwards too, that there was a full-scale U.S. government invasion of privacy rights afforded to Arab Americans to try and link them to terrorism. In fact, with the implementation of the internet as it was growing in the years between 2006 to 2010, you had FBI agents that were looking for mentally unstable individuals to take advantage and basically exclaimed that, oh, we found a bomb plot, and, you know, this guy had links to, you know, a charity in Detroit or in Oklahoma, and this charity was under suspicion because they just happened to be an Islamic charity with no links to terrorism. But then they found something that one person, you know, had some links with Hezbollah or Hamas, and then the whole organization, the whole charity would be blamed for it. And a lot of these cases fell apart in federal district court. In fact, the Supreme Court threw out a lot of cases regarding this war on Arab Americans by the FBI, and basically not just the FBI, but the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force, and other agencies, you know, throughout the country, but more prevalent in New York City because New York City was the epicenter of 9/11, right? So, you know, everybody was focusing on, you know, finding Islamic fundamentalist groups and individuals, but they didn't have to go all that far because there weren't many left inside the country regarding Islamic fundamentalist groups. A lot of these people had already left the country because after 9/11, it was smart to go back to their countries of birth to escape the pressure, the internal pressure that was coming in.
And there are areas in which we need to just expand our capacity to surveil those involved in terrorist activities. Telephone surveillance has been limited historically to specific telephones rather than to people, so that if the telephone number changes out of its home area, or if a person ceases using one telephone and begins to use another telephone, we have to go back to court to get new authority. Now, most Americans, we all understand that you can buy disposable telephones now, use them for a limited period of time, and throw them away. And it simply doesn't make sense to have the surveillance authority associated with the hardware or with the phone instead of with the person or the terrorist. And we're going to ask Congress to help us with items like that. I'm grateful for the opportunity to go to the members of Congress, many of whom have called me and spoken to me during this last week and indicated that they are eager to provide a basis for us to address the new challenges which we indeed are facing as a result of this turning point in the history of the United States.
What Ashcroft didn't know at this time was that discussion was already underway without him being present. And like I said before, Bush was meeting with Director Hayden regarding the NSA. What can you do for me? And the NSA was like, well, we got too many restrictions. And Bush said, never mind that. I can help you. And this was in a PBS documentary regarding the NSA, which was probably one of the best documentaries I ever saw post 9/11. It was about the NSA, and it was called Bush's War. And that was a very good fucking documentary. One of the best, top 3 ever in terms of Frontline. Frontline does phenomenal. Anyway, there was that meeting between Hayden and Bush about restrictions afforded by the NSA. And this was rightfully so, to protect the privacy rights of Americans. But after 9/11, like Kofi Black said, the gloves are off. Or as Cheney says, we now have to enter the dark side. In other words, we gotta be just as devious as the terrorists themselves to defeat the terrorists. But at what price? Well, the price doesn't come from them, it comes from me and you. Civil liberty, erosion thereof.
And we will develop the tools, strengthen our capacity, and persist in our investigation and effort to disrupt and to make and reduce the risk of reoccurrence in matters like this. I thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today and for the reporting you do on this issue. Thank you.
And, that's what the reverberating effects of September 11, 2001 continue to be felt. And I think it's going to be felt for all of time. And it's unlike any other event in human history. World War II, the assassination of President Kennedy, and other major events, but nothing like September 11, 2001, which changed the entire dynamics of the world and how we live it. And there's no event in history, none, where we can look back. Let's talk about a human event, right? Not a natural, but a human event in history where every fabric of daily life has been changed. And maybe that's the reason why I continue to, work under the learning more and more about, the events of September 11, 2001, because there's so much to digest. And why I always call myself a student and not an expert, because I'm still learning. And it's really just an expansive topic. So much, that has come from it. And before it is basically the investigations into the perpetrators of 9/11 and the failures that led to the successes. And then after 9/11, which is, infinitely worse than the events of September 11 itself. Millions are dead. Many millions had their lives changed drastically for the worse, whether they realize it or not. And that's why I'll continue to be active on YouTube and elsewhere regarding sharing information relating to this event, so that maybe one day we can have a better future. All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. See you in the next video, everybody. Take care.